Prime Minister Modi has hit the ground in typical style in Berlin after enduring Western taunts and criticism over India's stand on the Russia-Ukraine conflict so far. This is the first international visit by the Indian Prime Minister, and India is definitely on full display. These are just some of the images that have come out from Ukraine, from Germany, I beg your pardon, since the Prime Minister landed there earlier today. Take a look at some of these viral images as the Prime Minister of India receives the warmest possible welcome, very typical Desi style, for the Indian leader as he begins a highly substantive, highly meaningful, layered and full of meaning and implication Western Europe tour, starting with Berlin. These images are from Berlin. He's in Germany today. In just a short while from now, the Prime Minister will also be with the German Chancellor, who he observed a guard of honor with just a short while ago. There will hopefully be a statement as well. But we are about to tell you why this visit is so meaningful. Watch this report.
Надають чіткі гарантії безпеки.
In the shadow of the Ukraine war, as conflict draws Europe and NATO into another whirlpool of uncertainty, these images couldn't possibly be speaking any louder. With fanfare typical of the Indian Prime Minister's foreign visits, Modi has begun a high-speed tour of Western Europe. While the United States has indulged in public lecturing and gyan over India's stand in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Germany has been praising India, recognizing just how singular India's foreign policy maneuvers on this issue have been. As head of the G7, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, like his predecessor Angela Merkel, shares a warm equation with the Indian Prime Minister. But that doesn't mean Germany isn't looking to leverage India to pile the pressure on Putin's Russia. An invitation to India to attend the next G7 summit in June as a special guest is also said to be in the offing.
Europe has specially aligned, and these are the countries which have aligned itself against Russia. They call it the Russian invasion of Ukraine. India, as of now, has always maintained a very balanced stand on the entire issue, a neutral stand. So it's a very important geopolitical, if you talk about India's power, its emerging value of its stand in the entire Russia-Ukraine war, and how Prime Minister Modi takes this relationship forward with Europe.
और फिर जब वो आए तो लगा हम अभी से इतने तरोताजा हैं कि हम उनका पूरे लाइफ टाइम वेट कर सकते हैं।
अभी बताइए आप मिल पाए?
हाँ मिल पाए, हम एकदम सामने खड़े थे। आते बराबर मोदी जी ने कहा शुक्रिया, आप लोग इतने सुबह से आए हुए हैं। तो हमें बहुत अच्छा लगा वो सुन के कि उन्हें भी पता है कि लोग कितने वेट कर रहे हैं उनका और उत्साहित है उनके लिए।
बिल्कुल, जैसे वो हमारे तरफ आए और नमस्ते करके जो मोमेंट था, मतलब
और ढोल, आप ढोल बजाने वाले हैं तो ढोल में इनके अब ज्यादा जोश होगा, पूरा ढोल ताशा है इंटू 200 पावर। गरबा के नृत्य के साथ जो जोश यहाँ पर महिलाओं में दिख रहा है, उत्साह तमाम भारतीयों में दिख रहा है, और इनके सब के बीच ये गरबा का वो रंग है जो हिंदुस्तान और हिंदुस्तान की बढ़ती हुई ताकत का एक नजारा है। जब आप जर्मनी में, बर्लिन में ऐसी महत्वपूर्ण जगह पर, जो सबसे महत्वपूर्ण इमारत एक तरह से ब्रांडेनबर्ग गेट है, उसके सामने आप मिनी इंडिया देखते हैं। सॉफ्ट पावर डिप्लोमेसी के साथ साथ ये देखिए, अब यहाँ पर जो मौजूद पुरुष है वो भी गरबा करने लगे। गुजरात का जो रंग और जोश यहाँ पर दिखाई दे रहा है, उसको कोई रोक नहीं सकता, उसको कोई टोक नहीं सकता।
The color and fervor that frames the start of Modi's Europe tour also carries a lot of signaling, underscoring a popular leader who has spent the last 2 months navigating a series of global taunts for abstinence on Russia's invasion. With this turbulent global scenario as a canvas, the Europe tour is Modi's first international platform to flex India's uniquely forged foreign policy. A message to the world that India shapes its own relations and cannot be pressured by any side.
मैंने यूक्रेन और रूस दोनों के राष्ट्रपतियों से कई बार फोन पर बातचीत की। मैंने न सिर्फ शांति की अपील की, बल्कि मैंने राष्ट्रपति पुतिन को यूक्रेन के राष्ट्रपति के साथ सीधी बातचीत का सुझाव भी रखा।
From Germany, Modi heads to France, where a newly victorious President Emmanuel Macron is expected to sustain the warmth for the visiting Indian Prime Minister. Even while the Biden administration has taken public potshots at India, the two European NATO powers have handled things much more delicately, recognizing that the time to lecture India on foreign policy is perhaps history. Bureau Report, India Today. And signature Modi's foreign visit style, the Indian diaspora have really set the mood in Berlin as well. These are troubled times, but just take a look at some of the images like this one of Prime Minister Modi vibing with Indian kids in Berlin is one of the images that has been most shared on the internet all through today. You'll also hear some of these kids, in a short while from now on the show. But here's my colleague Anjana, who spoke to some of the very, very enthusiastic, excited Indian diaspora all lined up in Berlin to welcome the Prime Minister. Take a look.
दूसरी मुलाकात थी और कहा ना उनको मिलके एनर्जी डबल हो जाती है, दुगनी हो जाती है और वैसा ही था। उनको मिलके ऐसा लगा कि क्या बस उत्साह टू मच था हमारे लिए। बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है, उनके 2 मिनट बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट थे हमारे लिए। थैंक यू वेरी मच।
पीएम मोदी ने पूछा कि आप छत्रपति शिवाजी महाराज का पोशाक पहन कर आए हैं, कोई खास बात है क्या, क्यों पहन के? तो मैंने बोला हाँ, हमारी यहाँ पे शिवाजी महाराज जी की परफॉर्मेंस है, डांस परफॉर्मेंस है, तो इसलिए परफॉर्मेंस है। तो बोले हाँ, काफी अच्छा दिख रहे हो, कीप इट अप।
या पूरा गुजरात बर्लिन में ही है आज तो।
बहुत अच्छा अनुभव था, क्योंकि ऐसे हमने तो पुणे में गणेशोत्सव में बजा है, हमारे देश के प्रधानमंत्री के सामने बजाने की हमें कभी ये मौका मिलेगा ऐसा लगा नहीं था, पर यहाँ पे आके जर्मनी में आके उनके सामने बजाने का मौका मिला तो बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है।
Okay, so the Prime Minister Narendra Modi vibing there with those children has become in many ways a face of this entire visit now. Let's just listen into this interaction he had with some of these kids there.
पैसा यही हुई है। क्या बनाया? अच्छा
का ये दौरा तमाम चुनौतियों से निपटने का।
Take you straight now to India Today's Anjana Kashyap, who's in Berlin. She's been bringing you the best of the mood there on the ground, as well as the substance of what's on the table. Two things happening there in Berlin where you are right now, Anjana. One, an incredible reminder of the kind of people's connect that the Indian Prime Minister has at a very tricky time. India has been subject to a lot of, gyan from Western countries about its neutrality over the Russia-Ukraine war. At the same time, it is very clear that the Indian Prime Minister is a valued guest there in Europe, and those talks that are happening at this time are very significant.
Absolutely, Shiv. So 2 pictures of a very important story called India. One, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his connect with the Indian diaspora. We saw absolute madness for him. These people have been performing here in front of Brandenburg Gate for about 2-3 hours continuously, and then we could see them beating the drums there, waiting for him non-stop for 45 minutes. And when he emerged, there was absolutely madness to just hold him, see him, get pictures. But on the other hand, the relationship that you talked about, we had a gentleman from Chancellor Olaf Scholz party with us live an hour ago, who told us that Olaf Scholz values this relationship with India very much. It's been 70 years. In 2021, India celebrated 70 years of our strategic relationships with Germany. But what is important is in the Russia-Ukraine war, India wants to make it stand clear. Even when Boris Johnson came to India, he said India can play a crucial role because of the relationship Prime Minister Narendra Modi shares with Putin. India wants to keep its relationship with every country separately, and that gyan that the Western world is trying to actually throw over India, India is not ready to succumb to that. I think in spite of that, despite of that, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and India's power and its emergence is valued by every country, be it the talks with Joe Biden or what Boris Johnson displayed when he came to India, and now Olaf Scholz. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is not just interacting with Chancellor Olaf Scholz, he's also meeting the Denmark, Iceland, Finland, Norway, Sweden Prime Minister in the Nordic Summit tomorrow in Copenhagen. And then he goes over to personally congratulate Emmanuel Macron because he just was re-elected 10 days back. India's stand is absolutely clear. We are not succumbing to any kind of pressure. We stand as a country neutral on the Russia-Ukraine war, but we want to build our relationship with each country separately, keeping the nation and its interests in mind. Shiv.
And this visit has clearly affirmed that, very unique, very sort of Atmanirbhar, if I may call it that, foreign policy, which speaks for itself despite all these pulls and pressures with all of these countries trying to leverage India and, lecture India. But, last question, Anjana, because I know you're busy there, but, the body language that the Prime Minister enjoys with the diaspora, the people, of Berlin. You were right there in the middle of it. Those images were so compelling. You've covered so many of these visits in the past, Anjana, from New York to other world capitals. You've actually seen this over the last 8 years. Has the excitement gone down, or is that Modi mania still very much alive and well? It looked like it's totally alive and well.
Alive and thriving and actually scaling up, Shiv, because we saw the Indian diasporas in New York, as you mentioned yourself, but right here, 4 a.m. in the morning, Shiv, can you believe it? We were here at 5 a.m. because all these people told us at 4 a.m. in the morning, we are reaching there. If you want us to cover us live, please reach there by 5. I was here at 5 a.m. and they had already waited here for an hour. So you can imagine, these were people who were driving down 5 hours from different parts of Germany, southern Germany to other parts of Germany. They were all here because they wanted to just see him. And I saw women who were just screaming his name. And when Prime Minister Narendra Modi came out, they got to know that he's going to shake hands with them. We saw this entire flock leave all their performances here and rush there because they just wanted one-on-one interaction with him. The mania that he actually builds in the diaspora is alive, kicking and growing, I feel, Shiv, every time.
Incredible. Anjana, enjoy, and we'll keep coming back to you on that story. It's going to be Berlin today, Copenhagen tomorrow, and then Paris. Big Europe tour. Anjana, reporting live from Berlin on those big developments there. Now, let me just list out for you what I believe here in India today is the significance of the Modi visit. Anjana, touched upon some of those. Let me flesh it out for you because this is really important. The world is looking to leverage India's role. The world is definitely looking to leverage India's role because that's the main significance. The second big thing, India's neutrality is a lesson for Europe. It's something that Europe has looked at with a little bit of suspicion, but it's definitely a lesson for Europe. Now, critics who said India is isolated, they're looking really stupid today, aren't they? Because they are laughably wrong. India is far from isolated. It's being hosted in the top capitals of Europe. This is a major step-up opportunity for India. This is the high table that India has been aspiring to for a long time and deserves. And our foreign policy at this time clearly affords us that opportunity to move up. It's a huge embarrassment for the Biden administration in Washington, D.C. because they've been muscle flexing. They've been criticizing India. Their upstart deputy NSA had a lot of rebukes for India when he came here. This is a big slap for him. But possibly the biggest slap away from the diplomatic sphere is for Indian critics in Western media, whether it is analysts or think tank persons or former politicians or even current politicians in certain Western media and certain opinion givers at large who've been criticizing India for its neutral stance. Well, India is far from isolated, my friends. India is on the high table, and this particular platform clearly proves that India, far from being isolated, is counted upon as a reliable and responsible world power that must play a role in whatever is coming next in Europe in light of what's happening between Russia and Ukraine. Now, the nuts and bolts of what's on the agenda, because this is not just about the Ukraine war, this is also about what's happening between India and those countries. Obviously, Prime Minister Modi's delegation will be looking to boost trade and commerce between India and Europe. This is a very uncertain time for the world where economies are fragile. He will also be reaffirming India's friendship with its European partners. India shares very, very close ties with Germany and France and the Scandinavian nations, discussing terror, the Ukraine war, trade and deals obviously will be on the agenda as well. A green strategic partnership with Denmark is also on the agenda. Never forget that climate change and environment is extremely important to the Modi government. Post-pandemic recovery and climate change, hugely important. India is seen as a model country despite what happened during the second wave. So all of these will be the connective tissue around the very visible forward movement and progress that India's Prime Minister is making possible there in Berlin, tomorrow in Copenhagen, and then in Paris, France. So we will keep you up to speed on what is going to be a very high-tempo, high-voltage visit, typically, of the Indian Prime Minister. Day one in Berlin is almost done. He's meeting with the German Chancellor. We'll get you up to speed on what happens immediately after that meeting.